In this video, what I'd like to do is introduce the Marlowe Playground, our web-based application for interacting with Marlowe contracts. So we can do a number of things in here. We can write embedded contracts, so contracts that use Haskell to help us describe the contract. We can convert those contracts into pure Marlowe. We can analyze the contracts in the cloud. We can simulate their behavior with a smart input facility. And also we can develop contracts in an entirely visual language called Blockly. You can see the URL for the playground here. I think the other thing I would say is that there's a tutorial in there which covers all the material in these videos, but in a written form. So what I'd like to do in this first video is to give you an overview of the three different parts of the playground. Because the playground's built up of three different tabs, which you can see down the left-hand side. At this point, we're in the Haskell editor. You can see that I've indicated that we're there. Now, this is an editor that allows us to edit full Haskell programs that represent contracts. What do I mean by that? Well, we can show you some demos. So clicking on the top bar here on these will lead you to a demo. And here I've clicked on the escrow contract, which in fact the escrow contract that we looked at earlier in this set of videos. But also we've got a zero coupon bond, we've got a swap, and so on. So you can load these example contracts into the editor. What else can we do? Well, we can compile them. What we mean by compiling them is turning them into pure Marlowe. And at this stage, if there are any errors in what we've done, we'll get reports back from that. If we're happy with the compilation, the other thing we can do is send that contract to the simulator, which is in one of the other tabs that you see here. Now, what about describing a contract itself? In fact, what we do is, for this to be for us to be able to compile it, we have to adhere to the convention that what we're doing is defining a thing called contract with a small c of type capital C contract. So the thing called contract in here is the thing that gets compiled and sent to the simulator. So we've got an online Haskell environment. You can edit your Haskell there. You can compile it into a pure Marlowe contract. And then when you're happy with that, what we can do is we can send that to the simulator. So let's do that. We'll click on the simulator tab. Let's see what we can see. There's a bit more on the screen here. So what I want to do is run you through what we're giving you on this screen. As I said, we're in the simulation tab. You can always tell which tab you're in by looking in the left-hand column. And I said at the start of this that there's a tutorial. You will find the link to the tutorial is always in the bottom left-hand corner, wherever you are in the playground. Now, we're in, as I said, the simulator, and what you see in the main window here, the main part of the window, is the Marlowe contract. And again, we've got examples here. You can see that we can directly load the escrow contract here, or we can just load an empty contract. Okay, but what else have we got here? This is a simulator. What can we do in the simulation? Oh, okay, yes. Before we do that, we can save any contract we develop in here to GitHub as a GitHub gist, if you're familiar with that. And also, this button will turn the contract that we have here, the Marlowe contract, into a visual form in Blockly. So we can convert between our textual form and our visual form. And we'll look at the visual form shortly. Now, what does the simulation allow us to do? If you look at this pane at the bottom, this allows us to run step by step through the execution of a contract. So you can see here and there are various tabs in this bottom pane, the current state. So the current state is all the information about where the contract has evolved to so far. But also you can see here there's a static analysis tab, and there are tabs for warnings and errors. And it also tells us, if you look on the top line, it tells us when the contract will expire. So it says we know that in 100 blocks it will expire, and it tells you what the current block is. Okay, so that is our that pane there gives us all the information about the current state, and a static analysis, in fact, run from that state. But how do we actually produce inputs and transactions that feed into the contract? That's what happens here in the input composer. And the nice thing about this is that the only possible inputs you're offered here are ones which will move the contract on. And what this says is that the only thing the contract will do at the moment is to get a deposit of 450 ADA into Alice's account 0 as Alice. So that's, and you can then the plus button there is the thing that will add that input to the current transaction. So if you remember, we discussed this when we talked about execution. You can have a number of inputs, and payments can happen, and they get bundled together in a single transaction. And it is here that the transaction composer works. And you'll see as inputs are added, they will be put into the transaction composer. And the controls beneath that allow us to do a number of things. They allow us to apply this transaction, which will move the contract forward. It allows us to move the block time forward if we want. But also we can undo the previous move that we've made, pressing undo, or we can reset the contract right to its initial state by pressing reset. So we're using those controls, we're able to move forward and backward within the execution of a contract. We can try some things, undo them, try something else. So we can explore the tree of the contract. And the final, in the bottom right-hand corner, we have context-dependent advice for depending on where you are in the system. So that explains the simulation. We'll run through an example of simulation in the next video, but here you've seen what all the controls do. Now finally, let's move to the last pane, which is Blockly. You can see that we're here. And what you see in this pane is that you have a visual rendering of a contract. Now, I've created this contract by taking it from code to Blockly. I can also, using the control at the top, just to the left, up and to the left of here, to code, to turn the visual code here into code in the simulator. So I can move from Blockly to code, and in fact I can move, as we saw in the simulator tab, we can move from code to Blockly. So we can move backwards and forwards between these two. But the great thing about Blockly is we can build a contract just in this entirely visual form. And how do we do that? Well, at the top level, we have this contract. This is where we fit in a contract. And how do we build contracts? Well, the answer is that I've talked about to-code already. What we can do is select. So each of these will give us access to the available constructs. So how can we build observations? We click on observations here and it shows us. So for example, if we click on contracts, what we see is this. We see these visual representations of a when and a pay and an observation. And you can see this tells us precisely what we have to fill in for each of those templates. So if we chose an if, for example, we'd have to put an observation into this point and then a contract into those two. Here we have a when. What we have to do is put some cases into there, and then we continue. And we have to say what the timeout is by filling in this this text box here with a slot number. So that covers briefly how we use the three components. And what we'll do next is talk in a bit more detail about simulation.